This is the review of the 2024 BMW 330e, the plug-in hybrid version of the BMW 3 Series. Now this video is going to focus on what's unique to the plug-in hybrid version of this car, but there's a lot that's really similar to the regular 3 Series, like seat comfort, access, and usability. So check out the road test for the regular 3 Series for all of those details. First, you might be wondering what a plug-in hybrid even is. These are like regular hybrids, except with one big difference. They have larger batteries and larger motors, which gives them a dedicated electric-only range, usually about 20 to 40 miles, which is good for commuting and running errands. And when the battery is drained and those electric miles are empty, the vehicle switches over to regular hybrid operation. So unlike a battery electric vehicle, you don't have to worry about finding chargers when you're on a long trip. And to recharge the battery, you can just plug it into a standard 120-volt household outlet, or you can get a 240-volt EV home charger. A plug-in hybrid can be a good option if you're a little bit nervous about going with a full battery electric vehicle. It gives you some EV range, but you don't have to worry about charging. It can just be a logical step towards electrification. And they make especially good sense for somebody who has a shorter commute, doesn't really drive long distances on the highway too often, and most importantly is willing to plug it in overnight to recharge the battery. And unlike regular hybrids, plug-in hybrids are often eligible for federal tax incentives, which can help offset their higher purchase price. But there are a couple caveats with the driving experience of a plug-in hybrid. Don't expect it to have the blistering acceleration of most EVs or even be as quiet as EVs typically are. It can be a little bit louder and a little bit slower in their EV mode. And don't necessarily expect a consecutive or uninterrupted 40 or so miles of electric driving. Depending on the situation, that gas engine is likely to come on to assist with the power that's required. The 330e builds on top of what already makes the BMW 3 Series great. It's really nice to drive, it's a little bit sporty, and this version adds an electric motor in between the engine and the 8-speed transmission. All of this makes for a more efficient 3 Series, but only if you plug it in really often. So this car uses a similar 2-liter turbocharged engine as the regular 3 Series, but it combines it with an electric motor. And the total output is 288 horsepower, so it makes it pretty quick. The all-wheel drive version that we bought is rated for 20 miles of electric driving by the EPA. You can also get a rear-wheel drive version that gets 22 miles, but you're kind of splitting hairs at that point. Ultimately, it's pretty low as far as PHEVs go. So we bought a 2024 BMW 330e xDrive sedan for our test program. The MSRP on the car is $47,600, and we added a couple options. One is the driving assistance package, which gives you some of BMW's active driving assistance systems. That costs an additional $700, while the premium package, which brings things like heated steering wheel and lumbar adjustment, costs $2,350. We also paid $995 for destination, among a couple of other smaller options. All of that brought the grand total to $53,455. So just one note about the 330e. As of this recording, it's not part of BMW's 2025 lineup. Despite this car's relatively small battery pack, it still took us over 16 hours just to charge it using the included 120-volt charger. So if you own this car, you're really going to want to invest in a level 2 EV charger like the one we have connected now. And that's going to take the charge time just down to a couple of hours. You're really going to appreciate that because you got to charge this thing a lot just to get the extra efficiency out of it. Otherwise, charging this car is super simple. The charge port is here on the front fender. It's a little low, so you kind of have to duck down to get it. And then really close by, there's a bunch of information that shows up on the gauge cluster to tell you when it'll be done, in terms of which time of the day, also the state of charge of the battery and how many miles we have, and a bunch more. So charging the car, you'll do it a lot, but at least it's easy. Driving the 330e plug-in hybrid 3 Series is actually a lot like driving the regular version. It still feels sporty, it has pretty quick turn-in, and it's still a firm ride. That being said, this car weighs a couple hundred pounds more than the non-plug-in hybrid version, so it tends to smooth the ride out just a little bit more. But otherwise, it's pretty similar. Like a lot of plug-in hybrid models, this car has what's called a charge hold mode. And since when we started filming this, it actually only had a little bit of charge in it, I'm using that mode right now to kind of preserve that electric range. So it's telling me I have 4 miles, and in this mode, the engine's running, and it's basically just keeping that electric power for later use. When I put the car into its electric mode, the engine turns off, and basically I can drive it around in electric power only. Now, the way BMW has this set up, they basically put the motor in between the 8-speed transmission and the 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. So even in the electric mode, you still feel it shifting through the gears, which is a little bit weird, but otherwise it's actually pretty smooth and it accelerates pretty well in its electric only mode. And even when that charge is up, or if you press far enough into the gas pedal and it turns on that engine, that transition between hybrid and electric operation is really smooth. So ultimately, despite this car's low mileage in terms of its EV range, it actually operates in a really sophisticated and well manner. One thing BMW plug-in hybrids do really well, including this 330e, is the way they show you the information in the gauge cluster related to what the plug-in hybrid system is doing. And so what I mean by that is the gauge on the right is a power meter, and it's basically telling me if you keep it below this threshold, you will keep the engine off, but if you go above this threshold, the engine will turn on. So right now in the hybrid mode, it's telling me at about 30% of the total power capacity of the car, that'll turn the engine on. So basically if I accelerate harder, or if I need to merge or, transition onto a highway, that's probably gonna turn the engine on. Likewise, on the left side of the display on the speedometer is a maximum speed that will cause the engine to come on. So right now, again, in the hybrid mode, that's at about 65 miles per hour. Any faster than that, and the engine is guaranteed to come on. Something that happens pretty often with plug-in hybrids is that if you don't charge them up and they don't have a battery charge, they can actually be less efficient than their non-hybrid counterparts. And that's the case with this BMW 3 Series. Compared to the non-hybrid version, it actually gets 1 mile per gallon less in what's called charge sustaining mode compared to the non-hybrid 3 Series. And what charge sustaining means is the battery charge is actually empty, so the EV miles are up and the car is just operating as a hybrid model. That means you're going to want to plug this car in pretty often, or pretty much as often as you can, to keep that battery charged so that you can realize some of that extra efficiency that comes from the plug-in hybrid system. Another thing that I really like about BMW's setup here is that they make the drive modes really simple. There's a lot of plug-in hybrids that they kind of give you the regular drive modes that you're used to, like sport and eco and normal, and then they just add all the plug-in hybrid stuff on top of it. So you end up with like 8 modes that you got to sort through, and changing one changes the other, and it gets kind of complicated. BMW makes it way simpler and they combine them all together. So in this car, you just have sport, hybrid, and electric, and they each kind of do exactly what you would expect. Electric mode, EV only. Hybrid combines the two to try to be as most efficient as it can be, and then sport mode gives you maximum power and just kind of depletes the battery to give you a sportier driving experience. The other mode here is called charge hold mode, which is kind of interesting. We used that earlier just to keep the battery charged and basically save your electric range for later. One thing that BMW doesn't give you is a battery charge mode. A lot of plug-in hybrids do that. And when you activate that, it basically makes the engine work in overtime, so to speak, and it charges the battery while you drive. And that sounds cool, and it is, but it's not very efficient. It actually takes away from the efficiency of the vehicle. You're gonna use more gas while you do that. So I can understand BMW leaving it off. The other thing that is kind of impacted by going with the plug-in hybrid version of this car is you actually get less trunk space. And that used to be kind of the case with a lot of hybrid models and plug-in hybrid models maybe a decade or so ago, but we don't really see that too often. So it's a little bit of an old school compromise that you're dealing with. Ultimately, the seats still fold down and you do have a pretty wide trunk opening, but just keep that in mind when shopping for this car. So that's the review of the 2024 BMW 330e plug-in hybrid. For more results on this car and other plug-in hybrid models, visit cr.org.